asking them.
Please, Mark.
Okay. Came into the office yesterday, gave a little talk and, yeah, not talk, but a little situation talking about. And did you get a hold of the town manager after?
Between yesterday and today, no, I have not.
Okay. So, and Navarro, you didn't either? No. Okay. That's still the situation, what has on the strongest zoning for the planning board and all that, and everything else. I wanted to make sure that something at least gets talked about on the roof here, on the town hall, and then we get back together and just see what happens. If it can work together.
Sure, Mark. Mark, do you want to tell the planning board of your idea?
My ITA. It's 119 Main Street. What are you talking about?
Well, you had an idea to create to come together to talk about zoning and who should be part of that meeting or the group. Do you want to talk about that to the planning board? Because I think it's a good idea.
I would like to come in and have a pre-set-up talk.
Okay.
I can't do something like that by myself.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just update the board. Mark did come in yesterday, and he kind of floated the idea that he would like to see some of the bylaws kind of strengthened, with the idea that you said there's too much restaurants. Is that correct?
It's too much of one, so restaurants and businesses that is not generational ready.
Okay. Maybe service businesses. You want to see more economic development businesses with jobs and that was just kind of an overall conversation we kind of had. And, you know, I think at this point, I think that's a great process after the comprehensive plan is complete, in my eyes, is kind of an implementation strategy. But Mark just came in, obviously, and talked about it and requested to talk to the town manager, and I don't think Mike was available. And Alvaro and I talked to Mark a little bit, but it's obviously, it's a pretty big idea, and it's a big process, right? And so, obviously, it would be the kind of the preamble to a process that would occur, obviously, to recodify our bylaws, which I think we all kind of know need some work. And Mark just kind of came in and talked about it and tried to spawn a meeting to try to just discuss what could and can't be done at this point in time. So
It's basically a talk about with some of the committees that are involved in the zoning, and not just zoning, but overall site plans, plan board, everybody that's involved together, and to look forward to a future downtown and future business for the college people that get out of college who are studying and have their bachelor's degrees and stuff like that, in the services and the professional medicals and professional areas of jobs, and for the general family that come in that has a professional commercial family DNA inside of them, and there's no jobs that around here. Looking to try to keep them in the town and to understand that they can live here. Or if they have to go out of town to get to the T station, either way, but to make the Route 495 Council, which is technical like down Franklin, be something like that here.
All right, thanks, Mark. I mean, I think it does seem to tie in to me to the bigger effort that's going on with comprehensive plan. And so it seems like those things will, you know, as the results start coming out of comprehensive plan about what the goals of the town of Ashland are, the residents of the town in general, then it seems like we'll start to work on those exact things once we know what those results are from the residents of Ashland.
So on that, I'll just end it on this. Will Mr. Peter or Alvaro give me an email message that I can reply back on and just go from there?
sure, I'm happy to email you, Mark.
Like we've been doing on other things?
Oh, sure. Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh,
It's okay.
Yeah.
I made you a co-host, Paul, so you can unmute yourself. Okay, sorry about that.
okay.
Yeah, Mark, I'm happy to put an email together and email you.
No, we can put like a date, time, come in and get a preamble going, sort of thing.
I can look into the calendar and try to figure something out for you.
Go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, seeing no other public, really. We will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the public hearing for 20 Ponderosa Verizon Wireless Equipment Upgrade. Do you need to read that into the?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
The planning board will hear the planning board will hear the petition of Verizon 20 Alexander Drive, Wallingford, Connecticut, 06492, requesting a special permit modification per chapter 282, section 6.4, wireless communications facilities in 9.3 of the Ashland zoning bylaws. The applicant seeks to modify the existing special permit for the removal of 3 existing antennas and collar mounts, installing 8 new antennas, 3 new antennas with integrated radio heads, 8 radio heads and 1 OVP, 2 hybrid cables, and 1 new platform mount at the 123-foot center line of the existing 150-foot tower. There are no proposed changes to the tower height or compound size. That would be the fenced-in area at the bottom, obviously, of the pole. The added equipment is 5G capable. The property in question is located at 20 Ponderosa Road, Assessors Map 13, Lot 35, and in the Residential A zoning district. Just for a location, this is at the Ashland DPW, at the far end of Ponderosa Road. If you go past the Ashland Fishing Game Club, and then that's where you run into the Ashland DPW. There is a large, I think it's about 100 by 100 fenced-in area. It's a land lease that the town has with Crown Castle, and Verizon, represented tonight, is a co-tenant of that pole. And they are one of 4 carriers that are co-tenants on that Crown Castle pole. So with that said, if there's no questions from the board, I'll turn it over to the applicant who's here to introduce herself.
Good evening, members of the board and staff and members in the audience. My name is Dominica Tadashori. I'm permitting specialist with Crown Castle. Submitted this application on behalf of Verizon, who is our customer carrier. As you know, I've submitted a special permit amendment application on behalf of Verizon for 20 Ponderosa Road. As Peter mentioned, this is a 150-foot telecommunications monopole located at your DPW facility. Verizon is an existing carrier at the 123rd center line. Crown Castle owns the tower, and the town of Ashland is the property owner. Telecommunication upgrades are common and desired as technology changes pretty quickly, and it's important for the carriers to provide better telecommunication services to residents, businesses, and also first responders. Right now, Verizon currently has 3 antennas, and Verizon proposes to replace all the antennas and the existing mount and ancillary equipment with new mount and antennas at the exact same center line. There's no, as Peter mentioned, there's no change to the proposed tower height or compound size. This application constitutes an eligible facilities request per the FCC's regulations and does not constitute a substantial change to the tower and is a by right use by the federal law. The application materials that were submitted to you included with the application, it's also the construction drawings, the structure analysis report, and compliant radio frequency emissions analysis report. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have just some basic questions as we go through these frequently. But, okay, so on that tower, there are currently 2 other levels of antenna. Who else is on that tower, Peter? You know, just curious.
I can answer the question
Oh,
if you want
okay.
to, Madam
Please.
Chair. Okay. At the very top is T-Mobile, followed by Sprint, which is actually T-Mobile now.
Okay, T-Mobile.
Yep. And then Verizon.
Okay.
And the lowest level is Dish.
Oh, so that's, so pardon me while I look at the image I took today.
I mean, I went by our PDF and our structural analysis. So maybe the Dish one hasn't been done yet or is proposed, but I know the top 3 ones are there, the T-Mobile and the Verizon.
Yeah, I think Dish is proposed.
Yeah.
Dish has not come in front of this
But
board.
when they do come or want to come, they will be obviously at the lower level.
So right now, there are 3 levels, right? And they kind of start going down in size.
Yep.
Are the 3 to be removed that lowest level? Is that what is being removed?
So the lowest level, which is the 123rd center line, was Verizon. That is slated for, like, basically an overhaul replacement, because what is there now is deficient. The platform mount is extremely tiny, the antennas are antiquated.
Right, I'm just wondering what, like I said, what I'm looking at, there's an upper level, there's a middle layer, then there's really this tiny little small layer. The tiny little small layer is the one that
Yes.
you're talking about?
Yes, it's so deficient for technology today, so that is what's slated for replacement. It's long overdue, to be honest, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, and it would go back into that same that same
Yes.
slot?
Yes.
Okay, that same location.
Exact same center line.
So when it's taking out, oh, it's printed so small for my eyes. Remove those 3 antennas with the collar, and they're installing 3 dual antenna mounts. Install 3 antennas with integrated RRH, and install another 8 antennas. Can you tell me the difference in an antenna with an integrated RRH?
Absolutely.
And an 8, and the other one?
Absolutely, yes. So the platform mount that they're putting on is basically a square mount, okay? So what they're installing is like eight antennas. And then you have down there, you have installed 8 RRHs. Those are remote radio heads. Those 8 are going to go behind the 8 proposed antennas. Just think of it like little suitcases. And then on top of that, they're also going to install 3 antennas that have like almost like a duo antenna with radio. So it's kind of like it comes like a duo 2-for-1 as antennas. So basically it's like 11 antennas coming on. 3 have radios already in their basic design, and 8 of them are going to have radios behind them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when the testing was done, there's a letter describing, like, certain percentages, oh, here. This is from the Fox Hill Telecom,
Yes.
and it talks about a site total of 9.76%. This is about the emissions, right?
That's correct.
Is the 9.76 mean that it is, if we look at the FCC's allowable limits, the proposed total is 9.76
Yes, and
of the allowable?
I can tell you exactly everything about it if you want to.
That was kind of just my only question. I wanted to understand the percentage is related to the allowable limit.
So,
Now, is there a limit on the tower, like how much can come
yeah,
out of the?
100% is a fail, and 99.99 infinity is a pass. So this is 10 times below the FCC allowable limits.
And that would be is that for the tower as a whole?
Yeah, it's for literally all the carriers, all the radios on the tower, and it assumes the model that was used was assuming the worst pessimistic situation, a model that was run, basically where all of the radios for all the carriers on that tower are transmitting nonstop 24/7, which it doesn't do in real life. So it It's a model of the worst situation possible, and even the worst situation possible was 10 times under the limit.
So it has, so when it has Sector A, Sector B, Sector C, Sector D, are those, I'm just trying to understand from, based on what you said, so that the percentage of what we're looking at for Verizon on this one is 9.76%, right? I'm just looking at the summary on the back page of the.
So
box,
how I understand it, and I believe the 9.76 is for all the carriers for the entire tower.
Oh, yeah, it says the estimated composite emissions value for this site, assuming all carriers present, is 9.76% of the allowable established guidelines.
Yes,
Okay.
and Madam Chair, if you, unfortunately, the document doesn't have page numbers on it, unfortunately, but.
You're right.
Yeah, which is really not helpful. But right before the heat maps, the page right prior to the heat maps, it actually shows a table that says site composite MPE percentage. And it actually lists out the carrier, like Verizon, 7.49, and then they added up the T-Mobile one as well.
I see, yep, okay.
So is green Verizon at the top in this diagram?
That I can't answer. Actually, no, correction, that is the Verizon.
Okay, so
It
green's
is.
Verizon.
Yes.
Okay.
So it seems like Verizon is 9.76, right? And other ones would be other,
No, Madam Chair, the Verizon itself is 7.49, and when you add the T-Mobile ones as well, 2.79, it comes up to the percentage of 9.76.
oh, so, and the T-Mobile includes both of theirs?
Yes.
Both those tiers?
Yes.
Okay, got it,
Yep.
okay. And the other one is not on there yet?
That's correct.
Got it, okay, okay.
Just for clarification, is the second T-Mobile kind of shut off, you think? You don't know?
You know, unless I get, which I might have soon, I don't know, an application for T-Mobile, we'll find out what they're doing.
Okay,
Whether they choose to use that center line or not, I don't know yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Just curious,
I know, me too, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to understand these technical things a little bit better. Are there any other questions from the board? So this is a location, obviously, in the past, we've had questions about access, about work trucks coming in and maybe blocking access to residences. We've had, questions about hours of construction, but this is all happening at the Ashland DPW.
Yeah, so typically any work in this area, obviously is gonna be coordinated with Ashland DPW, and within a condition, obviously, coordination would have to concur.
Absolutely.
Concur with the DPW.
And is there anything also being changed out at the ground level?
No,
No, just, it's all on the tower?
principally, other than like, you know, a fiber cable.
Right,
That's
no
it.
new boxes being
No,
constructed?
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think, because particularly for that platform, they're gonna need like a big crane, I'm assuming, and that's
I
gonna take a lot
suspect
of.
that they probably will, so it will be like a coordination with the
Yeah,
town.
it'll be a lot of coordination for that.
Yeah.
Then the only thing I would say, I appreciate that the application, the Crown Castle went through our entire bylaw and commented. And I just appreciate that level
Oh,
of effort.
thank you.
And I can't say that people read this, but they do get published, and it gives background, like when we can't really deny if people ask.
Yeah.
It sort of, it spells it out, so.
Thank
I
you.
think
And any other applications I have with your town, that's my intent to keep up doing the same thing I did with this application.
Quick clarification question. This Telemon report has more quantities of proposed equipment antennas versus the 11. Is there a trick to read this chart?
I'm
It's
sorry.
saying proposed equipment configuration, though.
Yeah, that's what is proposed for this application.
So, but that's more than 11 antennas on this table.
They also have the T-Mobile ones as well, that I don't know if that's how he designated on here, but
Because it's saying proposed equipment configuration, so T-Mobile should not be part of this, right?
no, probably it's just like how they worded it is what I believe. Just a confusion with the wording. But you'll have better Verizon coverage in town once we get rid of that.
Because all the Samsung ones sounds like it is Verizon, so that count itself does not add up correctly. Because there is a schedule on this drawing set which shows Samsung products.
The new proposed equipment is a combination of Samsung and CommScope.
CommScope, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like CommScope is, on this chart is 8 of them, and Samsung is adding up to 15.
Unless the Samsung is the radio as well, because that would add, change the number as well. Yep, Samsung's the radio heads as well,
Okay.
so that's where the numbers come up. So most of the equipment on the proposed mount are going to be Samsung, with the exception of some CommScope.
So you're saying the things listed as Samsung telecommunications are actually the radio heads?
So I believe that how it was listed includes the radio heads and also the antennas that are Samsung.
So, okay.
So
So
it's a
and they're all
combination.
just, when it says number of antennas,
Yeah.
they're just, it's just, there's actually more various types of equipment there.
Exactly.
And what's listed on the drawing set is what's, makes it more makes it more descriptive, I guess.
Exactly.
Right, and so that's at 123 feet proposed, and then when it says other considered equipment, those are at 146, 147, and 148 feet, which would be the upper levels of the tower, I assume.
Yes, and so that would be the T-Mobile levels.
And then there's, and then there's some things at 36, 35, 36, which would be maybe that mid-level.
Yeah.
There's a higher level and a mid-level, okay. And we did have a question about, you might have heard us, Kate and I chatting about it a little bit, that the study, the Telemon study was done in August 2024, and it was using the 9th edition of the building code, and we're in a concurrence period of the building code right now, so is this, do you know if they have looked at this with the 10th edition of the building code, or if there's any
I
changes?
believe that they have. It's just that normally the structural analysis reports are usually done a substantial amount of time in advance.
Well in
because
advance, right.
They have to, because if the scope has to change or the equipment has to change, it all has to make sure that, passes structurally. So that's why these reports are always done 6 to 9 months, sometimes a year in advance. But I'm aware that the 10th edition came out in October.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Peter, is this something that, trying to remember if the other ones we've done, is there anything in here where our third party?
So no, because this is a privately owned pole. It's owned by Crown Castle.
Versus us owning the tank?
Correct. So when we own the tank, such as a water tower, it goes through peer review through the water department for structural analysis. For this tower, privately owned by Crown Castle, the town has no, I don't want to say no interest. However, it's not town property, so therefore there's no peer review done from a structural standpoint. This would just go to the building department for a permit.
Okay. Are there any questions? Otherwise, we can open it up to public comment. Okay. I'm just going to open it up for public comment, as it is a public hearing. So
Oh, do you want me to sit down?
you need to take a seat.
Oh, okay.
That's
sorry.
okay.
I thought you needed me close by in case I needed to answer anything.
You might
Okay,
need to answer
got it.
things.
My name is Diane Seralt, and I live at 66 Sudbury Road, which is, the tower is right behind. It's in my backyard. And talking today, it's like just 750 feet. So my concern has always been with that tower being there is health concerns, just because of the admissions. Now, I know I heard you say tonight that it's, in total, it's what, 9.76, which is 10 times under what the FCC limits are. But I still have that concern. You know, there's still our emissions constantly coming from this cell tower. And I mean, I just hear that I know this is supposed to allow the 5G capability, but I just understand just from, you know, with this going from 4G to 5G, that with all of this radiation that's being emitted, the verdict still isn't out yet on any kind of health hazards. So just being so near the tower, and, you know, there are other homes on the street as well, it concerns me.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we've, these issues obviously come up every time we have one of these proposals or these changes of equipment, these special permit modifications. So the concerns always come up. There's things in the news that travel through, you know, once in a while. And there are obviously some people that are really, you know, trying to delve into this and trying to figure out what the risks are. For the purposes of the planning board, we are under federal regulations that we really can't. We really can't reject the permit for issues of perceived concerns without there being. It's just not in our purview to do that. So as long as everything meets our bylaws and meets the required standards, then the board needs to approve. So that's the place that we're at. Peter can probably explain it better than I can, but.
Yeah, it comes down to what was mentioned today. I believe it is 2012, the SCC regulations came out, and they pretty much, as nationally, they kind of said if you're eligible facility and you meet the 6 criterias laid out within that 2012 bill and law that was passed, I think it was the Jobs Act, I believe. The Middle Class Jobs Act, President Obama signed in 2012, laid out that eligible facilities that were existing, if they met 6 criteria points, which this one does. I don't have those 6 criteria off the top of my head, but maybe the applicant does. That the planning boards and or local boards do not have the authority to deny upgrades of existing towers. And so that is the regulations that this application falls under. This is what the law that I was speaking to today on the phone with you about. However, here in Ashland, when upgrades are applied for, the biggest thing I think that this board tries to do is to make sure there's a public hearing and there's notification. to allow everyone within proximity of the tower within 300 feet, which is the notification regulations that we fall under Chapter 40A, are notified of the work being done, and therefore people know what is going on within their local area. And so I think that is the tack that the planning board has taken over the last few years when the update to cell towers come in regarding new equipment. And so that's kind of my summary of
I
the
also
situation.
just acknowledging that the board has listened to people with concerns whenever one of these projects comes up. But I want to say that the board has made no determination about whether it is at risk or not. And this actually has gone to the Board of Health as well. And I think also they have not determined that there is a risk based on the information out there at this time.
Can I
So-
just clarify? Because
Sure.
we have also, just to be clear, have not, that isn't under our purview. So we are not saying it's not a risk, and we aren't saying it is a risk. But I just, the way it was worded, it could be
I was just saying
misinterpreted.
we have made no determination, so, about that, and because it isn't in our purview to do, so we're not scientists in that way. So, but, what's that? Oh, it's still open if you want to make a comment.
Thank you again, Mark Tassoni, 119 Main Street. I'm against it because of the health reasons, but I also know that for the technical reasons for the tower itself, because there's more customers coming on that use the devices, so they need a stronger radio frequency to coincide with what is out there. So I'm basically either way on it. Health-wise, I'm not, but this is for the future road and from 4G, 5G. And the tower itself down in Ponderosa is a essential frequency carrier down there. And the two towers plus the middle one, and they're gonna have a Verizon and T-Mobile. But Samsung is basically, if I can guess it right, and correct me if I'm wrong, either anybody be behind me or not. But Samsung is their radio frequency material that is used on the towers themselves. Yes or no?
Can you, I don't know if we have that.
Is Samsung the one that carries the regular frequency, and to Verizon and T-Mobile, they send it out to their devices? But a Samsung major radio carrier.
No, the antennas that's mounted are from the manufacturer, from Samsung. They are
they're
the
just-
manufacturers of those products that's mounted there.
Yes.
So I was in the ballpark, but I was not hitting a home run. Okay. Yes, we have had this and the one on Cedar Street, the same thing, going through stuff like this. Health-wise, I can agree that it's a risk, but the Board of Health deems not to, but then again, the Board of Health needs to hear it more. To have this being going on, you can't say no. Basically, you can't say no because the FCC regulations has your hands tied, because if you try, it could be a court case. And this town doesn't want to go through that because it costs money and it's a real hassle. So, yes, I agree with what they want it for, but health-wise is the background negative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, so the next step in this would be for us to close the public hearing. If there are no further questions, we would vote to close the public hearing, and then we would, I guess, ask Peter to start to put together a.
Yeah, so just looking at the next meeting's date for the planning board is March 13th. I can pretty confident that I can get a drafted decision to the board fairly quickly. And then we could make a final determination. So I think either continue, closing the public hearing and continuing it out to March 13th is probably our next step.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for Verizon Wireless 20 Ponderosa Ave cell tower radio alterations.
Is there a second?
Second that.
And a roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Amanda Hayes, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So we have closed the public hearing, and we will move,
We'll review the decision on the 13th of March. Can you just come up to the
Yes.
microphone, please? Thank
Through
you.
you, Madam Chair. So that means that the decision will be reviewed and signed on the 13th.
Correct.
And then filed with the town.
Typically the day
clerk
after.
The day after, starting the 20-day appeal period
Correct.
and all of that. Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
and I assume that we are within our scope of time.
Yes, we are within our scope of
Yes.
time, and I think,
Okay.
obviously, we will be within the required days.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, next to on our agenda is an informal meeting with the owners and agents of 123 Pond Street. And we had talked to the applicants a month ago, maybe.
About a month or two
Yeah,
ago. I'm just
okay.
gonna go take, excuse me. I know Mike McKay is here online, but I do see the applicant in the hallway.
Okay,
So excuse me.
yeah. Okay, so, Peter, do you just want to give a update about where we are on this project?
Sure. Mike McKay has his hand up. Mike, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. And so my main direct communication has been through Mike McKay here, and he is the project applicant, excuse me, the project architect. Here tonight, we have George Connors, the engineer, Bruce Wheeler, who is the owner of the project. Thank you so much, Bruce. I know Bruce, Mike, and George have been working hard on this project, but a month ago, they did come into the planning board meeting, maybe a little bit about a month and a half ago, in December, okay, prior to Christmas, and we had a preliminary kind of discussion about the project. I know work has been done on the project. I know they took a lot of the comments back, and they've kind of came up with a new and improved plan for that matter, and I can pass that along. I did circulate this document, I believe, for the planning board this week, and I do have it visually, so I will share that up on the screen. But for the most part, I would just, like to say, Mike, George, and Bruce are here just to kind of open up a continue that preliminary discussion with the planning board about a future development at 37 James Road. With that said, I'm happy to hand it over to Mike. Mike, you are unmuted. And I do have the PDF if you would like me to share my screen. I'm happy to as well, and/or you are allowed to share the screen if you want to.
I'll do it, Peter. Thank you.
Okay.
It might be easier for me to control it.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter, and members of the board. Michael McKay. I'm actually on vacation, so don't feel bad for me. But I have my family running around outside, and I'm sitting in one of the bedrooms. So, but I'll just share the screen. Okay. I think as Peter mentioned, we were in, 6 weeks or so ago, maybe a little bit more, and there was a lot of feedback about the project from a siting situation, from a parking, And what we did is we looked at a lot of things that you know, the major item that we tried to address was the amount of parking on site. So from a scope standpoint, we are actually still very similar. We're in the 200 residential unit range, 17,000 square feet of commercial, and 325 parking spaces, and a mix of 100 one-bedrooms and 100 two-bedrooms. So the scope has not changed much, just the design. So from a we took some ideas from all the board. It was actually a great meeting, we thought, and some good feedback about the type of designs, the site, and so I'll just get into it a little bit. I'll just go through the context quickly. This is you know, a couple of context images, but the site in blue wraps all the way around James, and as a small piece, well, it's not a small piece, a significant piece on Pond. But it wraps around the gas station and two residences. But so this is context, a few photographs, bird's eye of the site, looking both ways up Pond Street. And again, I'll just go through this fast. This is the existing condition site plan. It's we're you know, a substantial site. This was the original plan that we submitted, and I think one of the comments, you know, the general feedback was there was a lot of parking, a lot of gray on the site, and not necessarily inviting. I will say that we took this. There's a lot of conservation issues. There's some easements there, so the siting of the buildings is not that easy. But you know, when George first looked at this site, even before we got involved, one of the major ideas was to get it away from the existing house, get the larger buildings away from the house, and we put screening and parking along here, but also as far away from the gas station as possible. So that was from a siting standpoint. So we actually didn't change the buildings a lot. We tweaked them a little bit, but they're generally in the same location, not necessarily the same footprint. So this was the existing. The proposed really cuts down on a lot of the parking. We actually put parking in both Building B and Building C at the ground level. So that took, you know, approximately 125 parking spaces and put them inside. This is a blow up of the entire site. So we have Building A on Pond, Building B, Building C, and then there's a Building D, which everybody liked. I think it was the favorite building because it was kind of a cute 1.5-story building. But this is a blow up version of the site. Building A still has commercial, 13,000 square feet of commercial. But what we've done is taken some clues from other projects that are going on in town with, you know, just softening up the edge, more landscaping, have walkways that will bring people walking along Pond Street into the site. In this particular idea, there's a little walkway that would wrap around the building, or wrap around Building A, get into this kind of triangular site. By getting a lot of the parking off the site, we have more amenities. We have a playground that would be a public playground in the middle of this, you know, courtyard between the three buildings. Building A would have a you know, potential. This is what the hope is, to have a cafe, but no matter what, it would be some type of a landscaped open sitting area in front of Building A, that again will help draw people into the site. Building B, I always had this idea during the meeting, was to introduce some, I'll call them duplexes, and call them a townhouse for whatever it's worth, but to soften up the edge of Building B, we would have entrances, each of these 4 units. It's not a significant number of units, but it's more just to break up the massing of a large building, but have two-story units that would have their own yard, have their own little landscaped area out front, and, create this little formal landscaped area. That would then open up more to the amenity space. This is a building amenity space with a gym, grills, fire pits. So this whole area would be developed as again, it's more of a softened area than we had before. Still building B is all residential, but the ground floor is parking. We would have lobby along this side. So we'd be entering into the building and exiting here and wrapping around the back to leave. Building C, again, ground level parking, but all this white would be ground level amenity space, lobby, mailroom, bike storage. But that building, again, it's softened by this ground floor break. We did explore putting some type of walkway going along the back, and it's not the best. It sounds great when we talked about a wetland. Maybe there's a potential to do something nice, but it's just not the best space back here, and it's still something that we'll explore further. But we did look into it a little bit, but it's just not. It's not the best. That's all I can say. I did forget about our little sport court area. This would be for residents in the back, and it's tucked away as far as we can, away from the buildings and our neighbors. So the sports courts would be in this back corner. But again, the amenity that we'd be adding is a significant playground in the courtyard. Building D hasn't changed at all. There's a couple of notes that we put down. We have met with one of our neighbors, and we're planning on meeting with the other neighbor that lives here. But we've a couple of suggestions on things that we may introduce to slow down traffic, maybe speed deterrent bumps or signage that would stop everybody from going to taking a turn onto James Road if you're leaving. So signage and curbing that would direct everybody towards the main entrance. So those are just some notes that we're putting more as reminders to us as we develop the plan. So let's see, sorry about that. This was the original concept for building A. Had this mansard roof. It is a 4-story building, commercial on the first floor. And what you'll see in all of the buildings is we're introducing more of an industrial mill feel to it, just a consistent, there'll be some brick, gray colors, still having the heavy commercial frontage, but this building has a recess, so that the tower on either side, and then a recess to break up the massing. We're introducing balconies sporadically. Not every unit will have a balcony, but we're planning, especially in the back of the building, we may have a few more balconies. But that's something, is an idea. I know there's feedback both ways about having balconies, having people hang their laundry, but it's still an amenity that might be a good thing to have as not as a general use, but several of the units. That's building A. The change, I'm sorry, I'm having a little freeze. Building B, this was the original design. It was a 5-story building. It was actually 4.5 stories, but it was flat roof with the half-story sort of stepped back from both elevations. Our new concept is introducing a fairly significant sloped roof and having the 5th floor built into the roof line with shed dormers, and even bringing that roof line down to the cornice down to the 4th floor, so that it is again, this is that building where the townhouses I talked about just breaking it up, that would be sticking out approximately 15, 20 feet. And this is the garage entrance here. So there's a large L and a large angle to this building that's not showing up. We don't have renderings of this yet. We wanted to get feedback tonight before we do that. But you'll see the consistency in the design, even though they're different buildings, the color, the brick, the base would be similar. This was building C. Again, it was all mixture of hardy siding and, you know, clapboard and baize, but it was just maybe a little bit harder, not as soft. And this is our version for building C, which again is similar to B, but different. If that, you know, just not the same. This has a significant tower that would be flanked by these shed dormers up on the top floor, and the amenity space again for at the ground level for building C. And the last but not least is our little cute. We haven't touched it. We you know, it's kind of off on its own, and this would be a a 2-story commercial building that's sort of sitting off by itself. So that's. I'm not sure if George wants to add anything. I'm sure Bruce would like to say a few words, but just from a redesign, I think the major focus was to get rid of some of the parking, put it in the buildings, and introduce more site amenity space, both for residents and for the town, that would be open to the public and to bring people in. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, just give us a minute while we digest a little bit here.
I could start with one question.
Please.
So, the building A is much, much more industrial than the others. And I mean, I'll just say personally, I think that's a dramatic change and improvement of the design. Like the other ones don't look inspiring. It looks like you see what you came with originally. So I feel like this is just something different that's going to be attractive to tenants and things. But the other ones just seem a little nicer, I guess, because maybe just not so harsh. So is there something that you chose to have not have any kind of features like the others?
I'm sorry, I have to.
So
I'm
it
not
just
sure.
looks like a very, very industrial, and I know the planning board threw out an idea that might fit there and be better, but I feel like some of the other features just make it more interesting on the B and C building.
I think the, because I said the same thing. I kept trying to figure out, am I looking at the front of this building or the back of this building? I think it's the only one we're looking at the street side instead of the back, instead of the courtyard side, right?
That's right.
And I think I think that it's partly it's the only one that's symmetrical. It's a very symmetrical building, so it's a very a little bit more static building than the other two, a little bit less dynamic than the other two. And given how dynamic that road is and continues to be, maybe it needs a little. It seems a little bit too balanced, I guess. You know, static. That building relative to the other ones.
And I wonder, again, I agree with Kate. My first impression was the other buildings look a little more interesting because of the different kinds of roofs. And there's a little more articulations in the other building. But I also am thinking, when I step back and look at it from the site plan point of view, you are going to see the other two buildings kind of partially as kind of a background to this building, and I wonder what that really looks like. If there is like a street view that we should kind of look at you're going to see a little bit of the building A, B, and C, and kind of together on the Pond Street side, and I wonder if that's going to add a little more drama to the whole experience versus just looking at it individually. And I don't know if we would think otherwise when we look at it together.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, I'll give you guys time to take in our words and to respond as well, but, I mean, I do appreciate with the materials that I assume were sent, which was not only 501 Pond Street, but 10 to 60 Main, which we talked about.
Yes, I
Yes.
believe so. What was sent to to the architect and Bruce and George was 501 Pond Street, right? And I think the biggest, one of the takeaways of that project was the Woonerf in the front, and how do you connect the street to the development? And then I do believe the hand-drawn drawing of 10 to 60 Main Street, which was sent over, that was during the planning board process of that project. Those are the two big pieces that I believe were circulated to the team.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I would have been very surprised if those weren't in the hands of the architect, because the things we loved about that little drawing, you know, before it sadly went away, I think you have been able to pick up and start running with, you know, this idea about this. I mean, for us, it was about the mill building history in Ashland, and a different kind of, a modern building but one that had some kind of root in the past, you know, something with a little bit more character that we were trying to develop. And I see some of those things coming through with the horizontality and the tower element on the one building. So I appreciate that kind of careful looking at the things we said we liked, you know, and for those not to be disregarded. It's interesting looking at the front again of that building A, where you have the more of that green space, public space, that little bit of buffer from Pond Street. And the park, for lack of a better term, that you've created out there is very asymmetrical. And I wonder if that gives a little incentive maybe that the building should also relate to the green space that you have out in front. So if the green space isn't symmetrical, maybe the building doesn't have to be either. And, you know, so how does that building become, again, a little bit more dynamic? How does it relate to its landscape? I think it's just a little bit too rigid kind of right now. For me personally. I really appreciate all the effort put into that central landscape and really starting to think about how it might be used. I know the first time was just a first pass at things, but it really, it gives an idea that different activities are happening here. You know, that people aren't just walking in a circle, and that taking the parking and putting it in other places allowed that space to grow in size, which makes it even better, a better, you know, place to be. Is the parking count still the same as it was? It seems like.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Other things we talked about at the time were, given that we have hundreds, literally hundreds of rental units that are going to be coming online, a question was, we talked about condos, potentially about having this be something different and having it be condos in these units instead of rentals. I don't know if that discussion happened, or if there's still that, if there's an argument to be made for that, if there's any advantage to doing that.
Go to the microphone.
Hi, Bruce Wheeler. I'm the principal of Pendulum. And we are taking a look at the possibility of condos as opposed to rentals. We're doing a study on that now. And as we get into it, we'll be happy to share our thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to keep following that idea along, and as well as the, you know, that we're always looking for the affordability component, affordability versus commercial space versus, you know, like I said, versus as you know, we have many many rentals that are going to be coming up, and that actually needs other stuff too. And so, always looking for how those can be maximized. I know there's a bottom line with things financially, but how can this project be different into what it's giving back to the town when some of those we have no control over? It's just all residences and it's all rental units, and there's nothing we can do about it. So, I appreciate just keeping that in mind.
And
More comments?
I appreciate the public space and that you are intending the public, like, there's not, it's not too far from other residents, and in fact, in the comprehensive plan, it came up to try to have some kind of amenity space within, we wanted half a mile, and we knew it wasn't, so this is, there, potentially, people could walk there, but I think that's sort of the community thing as well, that is an attraction. So I really appreciate that you kept that and enlarged it, actually.
Yeah, I really like tucking away the parking. I think that that's a great note from our last chat. As Kate noted, I think the public space, particularly the playground, you know, I can't think of another playground between sort of our public schools and Sherborne. That on that side of town, it's sort of Warren Elementary, and then probably all the way into Sherborne before you hit another one. I think that's
Yeah, no, 100%. I would actually, you know, I do not know of another public playground in that neck of the woods. I do not think Workman Circle has a playground in it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't know. But no, that is something that's there. I know it's something we're looking at with other investments that are being made in town, open space on the Pond Street side of town.
yeah. You know, consider myself a bit of a playground aficionado these days with my constituents at home, and that will be, you know, about half the distance to where we're usually schlepping to Cemetery Lane in Sherborne. So I think that's a great note, and just a way to sort of really have that be a vibrant feel with the commercial space and have those amenities in that courtyard area. So I think that's lovely, and I'm sort of, I agree with the note on if we can get a view of how it will look when you're driving down Pond, because I literally had the two buildings like B and C. I love this little note on the bottom here, but I'm sort of like trying to layer them, seeing how it would look. I think it would be really nice to be able to have that view of what, you know, everything's going to stack up, how it's going to stack up as you drive down Pond Street.
Yeah, and I think that's always something that that gets asked for, especially when this goes for design review committee eventually, is for those views from the street. So I know they're hard to kind of put in sometimes at this early stage, but as you start working toward them to kind of get the thing set up in the computer model, that those things are easy to do when you get there. Like doing the groundwork now will make it easier then, because it will come back. This is that the path we had talked about, like just making it easier for pedestrian and bikes? And I assume that's what that path is, right? That kind of gray path? Yeah. That would be, especially for pedestrian and bikes, trying to keep them out of the busiest, obviously they're going to have to cross some parking, but try to keep them out of the busiest parts of that, making crossing easy. It seems to me that it's fairly effective in doing that. So I appreciate that as well.
Is that an area for outside seating in the front?
That's what the intent is, to have outside seating,
Yeah.
or it will be a developed, open space.
Okay.
So the parking was cut back a little bit.
Maybe seating for a potential restaurant and/or pocket park in the front?
That's correct.
Okay.
I have a couple of, I have a couple of
We
quick
get complaints that no
responses.
one can hear.
So I think it would be great if we could work in both a restaurant and a cafe into the space. That would add a lot of life and vibrancy, and some outside seating between the front of Building A and Pond Street will add energy and attract people. And also, Mike did a great job of having parking very close to the playground so that it can be easily accessed by residents and of the community and the town as well, to zip in and use the playground and have it available to everyone.
Just a small design, when I wear my design hat, is when you kind of get to the next level of kind of composing all the 3 buildings in one elevation, my suggestion would be, one is to find a way to connect this Building A and the playground in some way visually, because it feels like it's, until you know the area, people will not know there's a playground that's like public. So connecting that would help. And I think visually, when you look at it, it'll look less dense. Even though each building has less than 100 units, it feels like 200 is a lot. I think visually, when you get to the next level, it may be helpful to see how you can connect the playground a little bit to the front, and if there is like a transparency of some way that you can create through. The other one is, if it's great that you're looking at like a restaurant and an outdoor seating, but from service point of view, that's tucked in such a corner. From getting trucks in and out, getting service, deliveries, you may land up losing a lot of the parking spots. So you may want to think about it as you're kind of looking at it next. If you really think that it's a great spot, that it's like tucked in, you have seating. But again, from your practical point of view and as you develop your design, I think paying attention to how it's serviced will be important for that to be really successful. So, I mean, you're still way, this one, I think you need to think about it as you're developing this drawing so that you don't lose parking spots for what it is intended right now.
Yeah, those are very helpful comments. Thank you.
Also so the James Road you're planning, it's almost like a semi-emergency, not
That's
regular
right.
use. That's awesome
That's
for
right.
those people.
It's access for the Building D.
Yep.
Primarily, and then emergency access for the rest of the community. We're going to have speed bumps and the curb radii and signage to pull everybody away from using James Road other than emergency access.
I'm sure those residents will probably appreciate that.
Yes.
If I may, I had just a couple of comments. We have a rendering from the street of the original design, and we did that rendering to show how far back Building C was. So it's something we're prepared to present as we develop. We understand showing this, showing the whole picture instead of static elevations. We're ready to do that. We were actually going to do it for today, but we thought we'd just get some feedback. Now I'll talk. I always say architectural gobbledygook because sometimes we talk. But the idea of Building A being so formal was it was the first building in the mill development, right? They were very formal mill building with the symmetrical entrance, and that's where we started. And then the back buildings, they got all kinds of money and they went crazy and built these outrageous, ornate buildings in the back. And that's how the mill buildings have organically developed over the years. That was kind of the thought process. If you look in this plan on the Building A, the back, the upper left corner, we have a turret, and that turret was actually the back was going to, our thought is that is a much more ornate elevation. The front is formal, symmetrical, but the back, especially, it's that entrance tower, elevator, stair for the residents would be, much more playful. And that was the thought. So, and that kind of ties in with the rest of the courtyard. So that was the thought. We could easily look at the front in a different way. It was more of, it's a retail ground floor, strong building, and then it got more playful as we got into the back. But we're, certainly take another look at that. But that's what we were thinking, we sit around our office banging our heads against the wall.
Yeah,
So-
I actually very much appreciate that you do have a story, to tell about. I wish we used those terms last time, like what is the story behind it? So I just think the story needs some tweaking, because I don't think I'm still not gonna, I like the story, but I'm not sure I like the product of that first
Well,
building.
and so obviously, I don't have the architect speak, but we all kind of said, meh. So, but I think the story of that is the playfulness of the site. Like, even though you're not overly thrilled with the wetland, it is still, like, you have the commercial street, which is kind of busy, and you have the commercial building across, but you still, like, that is kind of a special place, and you recognize it by recognizing James with those residents. And I think that's the part that can, it's kind of the story there, but maybe tying in with that.
And just just a factual question, is the easement, is that under the street? I was wondering where the easement is.
An easement here,
Oh, right there, okay.
yeah.
Okay. I was kind of seeing that on the site plan, but it was hard at that scale. I see. Yep. So that also puts the buildings kind of where they are located to avoid the easement. Okay.
Correct, yes.
What is the easement for? Okay.
Workman Circle.
It's a utility easement. I'm sorry, I didn't know the answer.
Yeah,
I-
I know it is a Workman Circle, Algonquin Way, Captain Eames Circle to Algonquin Way. Permit is Ledgemere 3. Ledgemere Condominium 3.
So I guess, my final comments would be, well, for one thing, really appreciate the effort that you've put in. I feel like the discussion, that you really listened to what we were saying and went and took that feedback, looked at the images that were sent and really tried to make something with it. So we very much appreciate that effort. I would say the big questions I have right now are about the condominiums versus apartments, number of apartments. I mean, I'm just gonna like say it that there's a lot of apartments going in, and we're always looking for 25% affordable. Someone's gonna say it. We need to say it. Even though we have 40Bs coming in, we're always keeping an eye out for that 25%. And the other thing is the commercial space. I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Beth Reynolds about different kinds of commercial space. If you haven't already, I would definitely, again, have that conversation with her. She knows Ashland. She can start, bringing some ideas to the table as well. And then the final thing for me is and I'm sure it's already embedded in your thoughts on the site, but issues of sustainability. Like, how do we, it'll come up. We have a best practices list that probably gets out of date every 6 months versus, as things change. But that's also something that we should make sure that they
Yeah.
have. It's not a bylaw. It's things that we just like to see for the direction Ashland is going. I mean, I know when I moved here 20 years ago, some of the things that stood out to me was that they had just started it was the farmer's market, I think, was at least in planning at that time, I think. And that there was a green building committee, like, that had just started up. So it was still there. The town was a lot smaller than it is today, but there were good things happening. And I think those things have only grown and increased and continue to be appreciated in town. So we're always looking for
Yeah, I'm
for
happy
those.
I'm happy to share the list, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's stuff embedded in them that they have intentions, but the more information we can get you about what we're looking for in advance, the easier it is to,
The story's
for all of us.
easier to tell.
that's right, so. Are there any other comments from the board too? Right. Do you have any other questions for us at this time?
No other questions. We'll think through all of those last suggestions and revise building A and prepare street perspective to share. And love to come back and share those items with you very soon.
I think this is a great process that we have going, so yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, because I think it's super helpful to us, and I think it's proven as well, and then it sort of keeps things going without being under a deadline, and you have to wait, and
Right.
all of that, so thank you.
I think the scoping sessions are incredibly efficient for us to work through things in this forum. So we appreciate it as well.
All right, great, thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Good seeing you.
Okay, sounds good. So, keep bumping the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
I'm getting back together here again.
Yeah. But they did,
Okay.
the state is
so-
updating the Charles River watershed. It's an update to there's new maps for the Charles River watershed.
All right, which is next on our agenda. Item 6, discussion of update to floodplain overlay district. Okay. So, I don't know if you guys had a chance to plow through the floodplain. Actually, before we well, in keeping with this, why don't we look at our schedule? And for these bylaws, and thank you, Alvaro, for putting this together. It's in the, kind of right after accessory dwelling units, in the front of the agenda. So, so we have the 2 bylaws, which is the floodplain and the ADU, and Alvaro put together this timeline here. And I think this allows for a little bit of wiggle room in it, it seems like, but it really has our discussions. So that the last discussion for us would be our next meeting, March 13th. And then what is the submit to assistant town planner, town manager, town council, final review? What does that entail?
That's kind of like the same process that we did with the MBTA before it goes to the warrant. If there's any comment that either the assistant town manager or town council has, they can review the bylaw that we're providing. They give us any sort of comments, and then we can make those edits before it actually goes to the warrant. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the best process will be that after our meeting on March 13, if we were able to have all the comments for us, we will have between the 13th to the 17th to like put everything together from the comments from the board, and then pass it down to town council and this town manager. But like you said, Tricia, like we can also like move those kind of like times around. Maybe after this discussion, we can send it to town council. They can take a look at it. If they have any revisions, they can send it back to us. And then
So we
kind of
have
keep
that in,
moving.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I just wanted to keep that calendar in mind. And also at the planning board public hearings, I know we like to have 2. Are we required to have 2 public hearings?
No,
No, okay,
we
Because-
just map out 2.
right.
Just there's an insurance policy, right? But we are, it's not required to have 2. You know, I think if we want to say, hey, let's move the advertisement date back a little bit, you know, and have another scoping session on the front end, instead of having 2 public hearings, we could do that.
Right, so because once they go to the newspaper, there's no changes.
Correct.
So we could have a scoping session before, put it in the paper and have one public hearing,
Correct.
you know, and have them on each side, because then you can actually incorporate changes that you hear from the public versus afterward, you can't. So,
Is,
a forum,
is there,
right?
oh, we could do a forum, but not the hearing, because I don't think there's time to change it. Once it goes to the warrant, we can, probably a typo, but we can't change it.
So I think the idea would be taking this public hearing and scooting it into a forum at the front end.
Right, right. Right.
Or close April 2nd.
Yeah, as an option, you know, like I said, if you, these aren't the kind of controversial warrant articles, but it's still something, for that same reason, we might not need 2 public hearings on the back end for these things. So it's,
I mean, I'd be a fan of that as a practice, because it always feels like if people do have and we can't change it, the only thing we can do is pull it, right? But this is being proactive, and do I think we're going to get a room full? No, either, but it's setting a precedent of a process where the public can have an impact versus when they can't.
I agree, and I think the ADUs might surprise, you know, I think any of these sort of state regulations that are coming down, I think might be touchy in light of some of the other recent stuff that's come through, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was some feedback. And
so would we maybe think about taking one of the public hearings off and opening up a spot, which would be like the 13th, well, what's between the 13th and the 21st? So it'd be the 21st, that would be a public forum. Potentially. Because the March 17th isn't a meeting, right? Well, I guess it would be the 20th, it would be March 20th.
Yeah, March
in the-
20th.
That would be the possible forum ahead of time, a forum before and hearing after, which would be.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it would be,
Yeah, March,
yeah.
so the
So it'd be
planning
the
board's gonna
20th.
meet in March, the planning board meets on the 13th and the 27th.
The 27th.
Right?
Oh, okay, oh, right, okay, 27th, right.
Yeah, and obviously the comp plan typically meets on the Thursday, that Thursday, the 20th. I think if we're doing a forum, like a one-off, I know that for the forums, the MBTA, we always did a Zoom meeting. I think we could follow suit and do the same.
So you're saying we don't have time to do a forum in the public, I mean, we could do one on March 13th, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
we
guess
could
that would be
do-
like a discussion and just
Discussion,
make sure
yeah.
that we advertise it and like have
Right.
enough.
Yeah, we
Right.
can advertise it on social media and have a, and to kind of move things on,
Yeah.
right
Why don't
now.
we do that, why don't we plan to do that?
Okay.
And get it out there. And then we'll see where we want to go from there with the rest of the calendar.
Okay. Because on the 13th, we're gonna review the decision for 20 Ponderosa Road.
Okay, yeah.
And we're gonna open up the public hearing for 240, 260 Pleasant Street,
The soccer field.
which is a recreational soccer field on those 2 vacant lots, which is a pretty good project.
Is there anything else on the 13th? That you,
No, but the only other thing that we have came in, there's an A&R that came in that we'll have to review, which I've reviewed, and then the Historic Commission. We can reach out to see if we can move them to the.
because remember, we don't have to, there's nothing we have to do with that, right? We can do that at any point in our calendar, so.
We can move them, or we could just give them a time. We could do
or
that.
if because they're working on like the same calendar, but they're not it didn't really seem like they were really open to changing the like actual text of their bylaw. So the 27th would be fine, right?
From what I recall in that whole conversation is that they're looking for support leading into town meeting from the planning board. Does that come on does a vote come on the 13th?
Versus March 27th, if they can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on if they're looking for feedback or they're just looking, or they're not, and they may not be.
I think also this is one of these times where you could say, hey, let's just, put some time limits on everybody and say, hey, I think that the Pleasant Street project, 45 minutes, it should take us maybe 15 minutes to review the decision. And then we can kind of give a half hour to the historical commission and then leave the rest of the meeting for the bylaws. And we could add time, and as long as the board is willing to kind of go by the time limit set for each project, I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Yeah, why don't
If we want to do that, or I'm happy to reach out to Jim Nielsen with the historical committee and say, hey, what do you think about coming back on the 27th?
Well, I think it would be good to have their take on it. Like it makes absolutely no difference to us because this is our bylaw. We just want, or maybe we want more time to really talk to you about it versus fitting in a slot. Or no, would rather get some feedback on things in case you guys have changes. What are they looking for exactly from us so that we can make an appropriate.
Okay.
Okay.
We can do that in time.
Okay. So, so that said, going back to the bylaws, the floodplain bylaw, I met today with Peter and Alvaro and Becca, because I had been reading through it and I just had to make sure I could kind of have a better understanding of what was going on. So we went through a bunch of, I had gone through it and said where it was unclear to me, things that were difficult to understand, where things weren't smooth. And did you say, Peter, that you made changes and that you and Alvaro made changes and put them in? Is that in the thing already?
So the bylaw that we put in today, we took away all the colors just to make it easier to read. Of course, everything that is on red and crossed, that's what it was on the old bylaw, and we're not planning on keeping. And then everything else is what we looked at last time. And then there's a couple of lines, like for example in, I want to say 8.1.3, 2, that there's all subdivisions, proposals, or other development that is underlined. That's because we were just making some changes on the language just to make it clearer. So all the areas that you see underlined are like that.
Okay. Yeah, so really, we're just kind of going through and making it read, just being organized, make it read more smoothly, taking out redundant information. And I think the biggest question we had in that discussion that I had for them was when we talked about special permits, when we talked about use regulations on 8.1.4, that use regulation basically said that any of the following uses, and I think this is from our original bylaw with some modifications, right? That any of the following uses which have low flood potential damage and cause no obstructions to flood flows shall be permitted, provided they do not require structures, fill, or storage of materials. And so these are all kind of they're like forestry and fishing and conservation, and so things that'll just be allowed because they don't do anything to the flood district. And then we go into special permit, which is where you want to build something in the floodplain. And then what is the process? And basically the process is a special permit because you're trying to build in the floodplain. So anything that comes to us there also has to go to Conservation Commission. And so what we were trying to do is make sure the things that are in between those two things, say our example was, well, what if you want to put up a fence in your yard and it's in the floodplain? You actually have to go into the Conservation Commission to put up a fence. Not because of this, but because of conservation. So we wanted to make sure that that was covered, and actually, I'm not sure that note got put in, because weren't we going to put in something in that first paragraph, 8.1.4, something, oh, we have wetlands protection. Weren't we going to actually put in Conservation Commission as
Isn't it the reference? Isn't that what he said last time? It's the MGL.
They
Yeah.
added the wetlands
Right, so the
protection
wetlands
bylaw.
protection, that MGL, that's the wetlands protection bylaw, Ashland Town Code, chapter 280. And so obviously those are those two are under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission.
okay, yep, okay.
So for the special permits, I don't know if I have the one we had. The state suggestion has, they suggest that you don't have anything by right. I get that we're contemplating keeping what we had. Do they have a process for special permit? And is this different from that, or does that follow that?
The state's process?
Yeah.
The state's process, let me try to pull.
That was that little paragraph that,
Yeah, it was a little paragraph. My colored sheet.
yeah.
So the state's process said the town, okay. So we had permits are required for the purpose development in the, for proposed development in the the floodplain overlay district. So requires a permit for all proposed construction and or development in the floodplain overlay district. And I think it's including new construction or change of the existing buildings, placement of manufactured homes, placement of agricultural facilities, fences, sheds, storage facilities, and or drilling, mining, paving, or any other development that may increase flood or adversity impacts to the floodplain and or other properties. So I think what we kind of came down to is all of those would be kind of grabbed by the special permit because they're not within the by right uses, right? And then also within the floodplain, you're gonna fall into the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And so,
Yeah, I mean, what my thought was, is that I really don't think the planning board wants to spend its time debating about where a fence goes, you know? And so what would happen is that those things would not fall under special permit by the planning board, but they all have to be looked at by conservation. So if the fence is okay for conservation, it's okay with me. So that list of things was just things I just didn't think is where we wanted to go on the planning board. When really what we would be doing is, well, let's see what conservation says. But I'm open to other interpretations of
yeah,
that.
this is just obviously a conversation.
And would that be the same situation for the MBTA overlay district? That it would have to go before Concom?
Yeah, they all have to. And everything has to go through conservation anyway. Like that's separate from MBTA. Like,
If any parcel that is within the floodplain, it will follow right back into conservation, regardless of it being
So it's like a similar rationale.
it is a similar rationale to me.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, these two parcels, and, you know, Alvaro also made this nice little diagram to show us where that parcels were. So both of those are, they don't get a free pass. They both have to go through conservation, but they don't have to have a special permit. They have their regular site plan review under MBTA, but they don't need a special permit. We don't double down on the special permit from the planning board.
Because, okay.
you know, for issues of floodplain. To me, that's not our expertise. Let conservation handle it, which they would have anyway, and we would have deferred to them anyway. So to me, it was a non-issue.
And Peter, you said that, that you did a training on this and that the state was recommending that you write the exception in? Okay, so it's like fully,
Yeah,
like
it's
they're
in,
aware of the tension and are like.
they're
fine.
aware of this whole, the MBTA stuff, right? And the MBTA bylaws. And the biggest effort for the MBTA bylaws was to remove special permits to allow by right
Right.
development.
Right.
So if a MBTA zone was in the MBTA, excuse me, if your MBTA zone was crossed with the overlay district, that's gonna be a red flag.
And so they're recommending this language.
Correct.
That's helpful. And I think underscores your point.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I don't think that's true. I think they don't think you should have any by right exemptions. That's my recollection from the last meeting. And so, but they're saying if you have an MBTA, you can't.
They
So-
pretty much said, be careful, and if you do, the advised point is to talk to legal counsel and have an exemption. You know, in this instance, we do have two parcels. One has a 40B proposed, and then the second parcel is I believe it's 1.6, 0.7 acres within the total parcel.
So,
I guess like that's what I'm wondering. So in the training, are they, when they were flagging it, they weren't saying like, these two things cannot be in tension. They were saying if you have overlap, just write it into an exemption. For
Yeah,
this
they ever
bylaw.
said, correct.
Okay.
And research it. And I think what we came up with is that our MBTA is so specific on acreage, using Cirrus as the main key piece, right, of meeting all requirements and having one contiguous area be greater than 50% of the total overall area is, you know, not to go back and redo that whole process, just to put in an exemption with the understanding of the geographically what is going on here in Ashland. That's probably the best way to kind of solve the matter.
Has town council weighed in on it?
I've had discussions with her about it, yes. But I'm happy to take it to her. I'm happy to have a further discussion and bring it back to the board for the matter of the bylaw development.
I mean, it makes sense to me if the answer's sort of being like fed to us by the state, like understanding that these things could be in conflict.
Yeah,
But I guess, I think Kate raised the point last meeting, like the floodplain's there, you know,
they don't want you
They
to
don't
build
want
in
you to build in the
floodplain,
floodplain,
and
but,
we're
like,
encouraging it.
and we're sort
basically.
of like in this, but we also can't have a special permit required in the MBTA zoning, and like, they sort of, we're in this difficult situation because the MBTA had to come before this, and now it's like, what do you do? And we can't be the only town that's in this situation. I
No.
would feel better if town council like gave blessing as on, I think the rationale makes perfect sense to me, Tricia. Like, that it's conservation's wheelhouse.
yeah, obviously, we're gonna have to have town council look at it, and, you know, and you've already had discussions with her, that's just a normal part of the process, right? But my question is like, well, what's the alternative, right? We're gonna redo our MBTA zoning before this? Like, right, right, it's already in there. Those zones are already in there, it's already being reviewed by the state. And it already was sensitive land. We knew that. It's part of the equation. It's not like it was, ooh, surprise, it's a flood zone. It's already been in there, like from day one. So,
But, I mean, that might have been a mistake. Like, let's face it, that, I did not know that when that was presented. No one said that, hey, this 6-acre parcel is sensitive land, and I'm not sure the public knew that. So the people doing that knew that, and that's fine, but like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I cannot support anything that the state gives you, we don't wanna build here, and then we're just saying it's okay. And I get that there's other conservation, but I will not support that. I think,
I mean, I think it's a little, my perspective is I think the state might be saying conflicting things to communities. That like, we do want you to build here, right? Because they do want building within
yes.
certain radius from train stations, and mean, the train line into Boston follows the river, right? Like, we can't be the only community in this situation. So I think that there might be two messages, right? On the whole, we don't want you building the floodplain, but also build near your train stations, which again, we can't be the only community that has the overlap.
I think it's just an acknowledgement that there's a million gray situations, right? Things aren't black and white. There's a million situations like, yes, these are in the floodplain. You know what? They're both parking lots right now, right? And it's not going to change. No one's putting that back to be a park, right? So, so it's a little bit to me, it's being kind of realistic about it as well. So but what's the alternative? Like,
Yeah,
what
and
is the
1060
alternative?
1060 is it's not just a parking lot, that's
The entire site.
commercial buildings.
It's
Yeah,
commercial building.
Yeah, that's businesses.
Yeah,
So,
you're talking about a building built in the 1840s.
I guess right, so that's been built,
Correct.
right? So that's a question of a replacement. So I think all of that to say, like, Kate, my initial reaction last week or last meeting was like, oh, ooh, like, this feels like it's in major tension with sort of the intent, but then it does also feel like we're being given conflicting directives, and I think, to your point, Tricia,
And the
what do we
state has
do?
approved the housing for
Right,
that site,
right.
right? So there's a
So-
third
I
party.
think that's why I
and-
wanted to clarify with Peter, like, obviously, like, the issue's being flagged, this is the solution that it sounds like is being presented. So if our town council says, like, the exception is good, I feel like that's good enough for me.
So for me, though, I mean, bylaws should mean something, right? And so it is about principle when you sort of say, well, it doesn't really matter because something's going to be built there, and they said housing, and I just don't agree with that way of looking at it.
Then what is your proposed alternative so that we can weigh out what the proposed
Well,
alternative
we
would
would
be?
have to look at MBTA zoning, what
Changing the MBTA zoning.
that, I guess we would have to. I mean, that would be probably the prudent thing to do. I would have never put it all in sensitive land myself. I really didn't know that. I mean, I wish that was flagged.
Well, it's just that it's on sensitive land and MBTA allows it to be there, right? It's not that it was a secret.
You
They-
can count, yeah.
You can
it's-
count it. It's allowed.
And I think like in a lot of
Right?
the presentations, there was the 3 different maps that show the sensitive land, the excluded land, and the density denominator, which was the actual one that will take away density for it. So there was not really a secret. There were 3 maps there in every presentation that show exactly the specific areas. Maybe we were not as great at doing the point of like following up and pointing out in every single one, but there was 3 maps in every single presentation that were showing that. And I think that if the state really didn't want any sort of building in there, they would have made it in the model so you will not count any of that land, like they did for the density denominator, which actually subtracts it.
Yeah, it to me just feels not supportive of the intent of the floodplain rules at all.
I think, well, so we'll have the forum on it, and then we'll have to take a vote on which way to proceed, with it. I think if we have it in there, that we're negating our own MBTA bylaw, right? So we'd have to figure that out with the state. But my thing is, we put it in there for the state. Let the state, the state is giving us 3 different things,
Yes.
that to deal with. Let the state decide if we're handling it okay. Why should one thing get precedence over the other things that are important?
Because
Right.
That's
when,
exactly,
Environment should get precedent over.
when the MBTA package is reviewed, they would pay attention to each of those parcels and the features in those parcels. So the fact that this is a sensitive land would show up in some shape or form
Yeah.
for their review.
It's in the spreadsheet.
And I wonder if we also have like a backup information just for our own clarity. What does that sensitive land really, how do you define that? And if there are, again, categories, which is why this is passing, I mean, assuming that NBTA package is getting passed without questions, maybe it's passing under like bylaws, like you said, always has the interpretation is one thing, and then there's always those sublines that probably we need to look at. I wonder if there is a language of what that sensitive land means. And if there is a category that this falls in between two categories, then that's why it may pass. It may be a homework just for us, may not be something that we want to dig up, but I'm guessing if MBTA package is getting reviewed, they should catch it instead of us trying to.
I mean, to Alvaro's point, they had the formula, and like, we wouldn't, if they had wanted us, if they had
they
wanted
didn't
you to not use
exclude
that
it.
land, they would have excluded it.
Correct.
Right, so I think, to Tricia's point, we are being dealt a hand where things are in conflict with one another. We aren't, I understand we might have each our personal way of ranking them and saying which thing is more important. I think for me, when I look at a situation where you have regulations or rules that might be interpreted as in conflict with one another, like that's where I'm saying, like, do we have an opinion of our council?
Okay.
To be able to say for us, to help us say, okay, we have things that are in tension. What is our council's legal opinion on how they rank? And I think that would make me feel better to come to this conclusion, because I think this conclusion is reasonable. I think I just want the backing of legal counsel to say, listen, yeah, in a situation where we are dealing with, regulations that are in
Conflicting
tension with one
regulations,
another,
yes.
and directives from the state that are in tension with one another, are we in the clear to use this solution?
But the MBTA, they didn't tell us to put it there. That's self-induced conflict. Right,
No,
the
but they-
floodplain, we do not control that. It's a federal government and issued and expanded. So that conflict was self-created by Ashland. So I understand what you're saying, but you act like we didn't control it, and we did.
But the state's also controlling it, because they had to review the proposal. They created the formulas and the whole, what you could use and what you couldn't use. And so I guess what we're dealing with is, a mandate from the state on MBTA, a mandate from the state on the floodplain regulation. So, and then when they're in conflict with one another, what do you do?
Yeah.
That's where I'm looking for, like, if we have the blessing of town council to write the exception in, and they think that that's a reasonable and legal way to deal with that tension, I would feel a whole lot better about having it in there. Because I don't want to have to revisit MBTA, but I share some of those concerns, Kate, and I would feel better having our legal counsel say to us, this is a reasonable way to resolve it, and push it to Concom.
I think you've already discussed it with Lisa.
I'm happy to, but if you want me to again,
No, totally.
I will.
Let's,
And
I mean,
that's what it comes down to, I think.
we're not, and it's
Yeah,
not,
I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm
And
happy
she,
to-
I mean, I guess, like, when you talked to her about it, she felt,
Yeah, this was a solution that was feasible, in my eyes. And when I talk to Lisa on Wednesday, I'll see if I can get her opinion. And if she wants to, write up an email, I think I'm happy to take that to the board.
okay,
And then kind of go from there. I think it's a discussion.
Yeah.
And things are in conflict, right? Things are always in conflict, right? You're never gonna have everything line up together. Even if it's one state department saying one thing and it's another state department saying the other thing.
exactly.
And that's what we
this
have
is the
here.
stuff that, like, I also feel a little bit like,
And we're at the crossroads
yeah.
at a local level.
And-
And that's what it comes down to.
and you
And I
also
feel
have
like
to,
Anna would be saying the same thing if she were.
well, you have to understand that the special permit, it just says no structure or building can be put in these areas without a special permit. We can decide to put something in that area with a special permit. I'm not saying we should. I have the same principles, but we're balancing out complex things, and it's not black and white. Yeah, you wish everything was just perfect, but it's not.
Right.
You
And-
know, so.
To your point, it's the whole by right issue with the, that's sort of where the MBT zoning puts you in a pickle, right? Because yes, we could, under a special permit, approve a building there, right? It's just that that's the hurdle that can't be there because of MBTA zoning, and that's what's been created.
But
in
it still
Hyannis
has
by
to
the
go
state.
through conservation.
Of course, yes. And so I
So-
completely understand that rationale.
Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to know that, you know, this is not my area of legal expertise, so I, you know, as a lawyer, I'm inclined to, when things are in tension with each other, have the blessing of a lawyer who it is their area of expertise.
Yeah, no, the
You
other-
can say that's like, this is a reasonable
That's fine.
solution.
I hear, hear the situation. Whatever happens in the site, right, and mind you, it's a site where the owners petitioned us to increase, to bring MBTA zoning to them, right? And whatever goes on this site, right, is going to have to go through site plan approval, through the planning board process. It's gonna trigger stormwater review that goes through the Conservation Commission. And anything in the floodplain would have to go through the Conservation Commission. So it's not like you're just gonna say willy-nilly, go out there and build whatever you want, right? However, I do understand your concerns, and I'll talk to Lisa Mead, Town Council, and bring back to the board her opinion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to be persnickety about it, because I think it's a completely reasonable
I won't hold it against you.
solution.
Okay, so is there any other, the other thing in here, which I think Peter mentioned last time, is the requirement for recreational vehicles that are placed on a site to be elevated and anchored in I don't know what elevated means, but elevated and anchored in accordance with the zone's regulations for foundation and elevation requirements. So basically, anyone with a camper? Winnebago?
I always said Winnebago. I think, yeah, Winnebago.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what elevation requirements, like, do they need to build a plinth to put this thing on, or, I'm not sure what that,
I think you just could call Mike Kane and you go to 126 storage. If I had a Winnebago and I lived in a flood district, you know, I think that's my solution. But, yeah, I think the biggest thing is they don't want these rolling down the river. I think there's a song about that. Right?
Yeah, so they define recreational vehicle and they don't say anything about what that elevation is. Can we ask the state on that? What, like, we shouldn't write something
Yeah.
less clear. We should try to be clear. If we
Yeah.
don't, if we're saying, right, we don't understand.
can we
Let's
find
try to
out,
clear that
Yeah, I can
up.
flag it
can we
out.
find out what elevated and anchored means?
Elevated and anchored, yep, I can.
Yeah, elevated, how much? I'm thinking,
Put some 2x4s under and then, yeah.
well, I'm thinking like at the Cape where you have to put the first floor of a house
Yeah.
8 feet in the air.
Right.
Is that where your Winnebago is, you know? Hydraulics? Yeah, exactly, so it's out of the flood zone.
I mean, likely it's not gonna come up, but that would be nice if we could have that
Yeah,
clarified.
well, because it is something that you could get people here that say, hey, I have that,
Yeah,
you know? So I guess the process would be then to get information on that, to get information from Lisa on the MBTA, to take out all the extra text in here, so now that we're not showing what is there now, we're just showing a clean bylaw would be my preference. And then to have that for the forum at our next meeting, if that's what we're going to do, right? So that it's very clear what we're doing. We can have copies that show the original bylaw, but I think it gets very confusing when you're seeing both at one time and things crossed out, and it just wants to be one clean bylaw.
is it, how hard is it to create like the things that we pulled out of Ashland? Like, instead of just showing them all, like, there's a few changes, right? There's not a lot.
I mean, we can have the 2 copies of the 2 bylaws.
Yeah.
Here's what we have now and here's what we're proposing. But I think to me, it's about taking the old and
Oh, yeah, no, it's
Not-
time to get rid
of the whole thing and here's the fresh.
That makes it
right?
more confusing,
Yeah.
but people are going, if people come to the forum and ask, they're gonna wanna see what's being replaced, I think.
Well, I think we can have 2 handouts,
Yeah,
right?
I'd say
New
just
and
2
old,
handouts.
clearly labeled, new
Yeah.
or old, existing proposed,
Yeah.
or something like that, And then we can kind of go through how they're different. And obviously, like, all these definitions are different, kind of like, big section that wasn't there before, and, does that sound like an okay process? Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about with it? Okay. In that case, we don't need to make a motion or anything. We'll just get that information, and we'll get the clean copies ready so that we can look at them as well. Get it all nice and edited, so that we're putting our best foot forward in 2 weeks. And then we'll can get comments from the public. All right. So then the other one is accessory dwelling unit. So you'll see next in the agenda, right before the calendar, is I just went through this today, kind of editing, and Anna's not here she was kind of working on this stuff too. But I went through the bylaw that Peter put together after combining several and talking to Lisa. But I went through it with my first pass at a fine-tooth comb, trying to make it clear, trying to make it, the same term, that we're using the same terminology all the time. And this kind of 1.5-page thing is where I ended up. So the first part of it is just obviously purpose. And the purpose obviously is to increase the number of rental units, the number of affordable rental units, and the diversity of housing options. Obviously, we can add things to that, but I was trying to keep it really clear. The general requirements: ADU shall only be permitted in a zoning districts that allows by right single-family residential. That's the Massachusetts law. ADU is only allowed as an accessory to a single-family dwelling. So for instance, you can't put an accessory unit where you have your, like someone has their business, right? Or an empty piece of land. You can't just put on an ADU. You're putting on a house, then not an ADU, right? An ADU is allowed within, attached to, or detached from a single-family dwelling. No more than one ADU shall be permitted for each principal dwelling unit. And with a single-family residential, you can only have one dwelling unit on it, right?
Correct.
The ADU and the principal dwelling unit shall remain on the same lot and not be divided into 2 separate lots. So there's no, oh, now I can subdivide my lot and have 2 properties. An ADU may not be utilized as a short-term rental as defined. And Peter had a note on this that.
Yeah, just kind of looking at other bylaws. I found one, and then this is kind of not a proposed, but just to kind of read it, is that it says short-term rentals as defined, obviously, are prohibited in both the accessory and principal dwelling. So in that case, they're saying, okay, there's no short-term rental in the ADU, which is new, and also there's no short-term rental in the principal structure on the lot. Now the question is, would you like to add that verbiage to our bylaw as proposed?
I think yes, because otherwise it's the same thing. You can move into your ADU and rent out your house, right? Same issue.
Agree.
So it's a little, okay.
So if the goal is to provide housing, not hotel, then let's provide housing, is my opinion on it.
I agree with that.
And then Peter also had a thought about putting in something that just saying it can't be condoized. Like you can't take the.
Correct. So I've seen one of the things that keeps coming up in conversations is, can you condoize, right? And I think that's also still taken away from the intent, right, of the ADU bylaw. And so I've seen some towns saying you cannot condoize. And so again, just very similar to that is how do you can't separate into 2 different lots. We're also saying you can't condoize it and have 2 different ownership, create a HOA. And in my eyes, I think I personally, from my opinion, which I will share without anybody asking, I think it's good to add to the bylaw. And if it's not legal, then let the state cross it out, right?
Yeah.
And go through that process. But I think not adding it is kind of at least closes that door without having to open up that can of worms.
So kind of along that 7.6.24, there, I can't swear in Ashland there are two houses on one lot, but they commonly exist, so that could mean two houses, two ADUs, unless we change that.
Come again? Sometimes there are two houses on
Yeah.
one lot. It's very, very few and far between.
Right.
Yeah,
But the
and-
way that is, you could, each one could have an ADU. I'm not saying that's wrong, but we should make sure
And
it's
what,
acknowledged.
what number is this?
7.6.24.
Okay.
So it maybe
No
should
more
be,
than one ADU shall be permitted for each principal dwelling unit. So I think Kate's saying if there's two principal dwelling units on
Yeah.
a single
Okay.
lot, they could each carry an
Yeah.
They
ADU,
could.
the way it's written.
So it's
Right.
like
And-
slat and or lot.
yeah, and no more than one per lot, you could say.
Yeah.
So whether you're going by the lot or by the number of dwelling units, you still just get one,
Okay.
at least at the present time. Let's get it,
Yeah.
control of this thing before we expand it.
There are situations that there are two houses on the lot.
Yeah.
Those situations typically occur when both houses are therefore pre-existing non-conforming and they're built prior to
Right.
to zoning. And the only way to split that is known as the 81L, and that is when you take that lot, that you can actually split that lot
it, yeah.
without either lot being conform,
Right.
either lot being conforming, kind of like one of those weird nuances within land court.
Right, so let's add that in.
Which
Okay.
then they could have two ADUs, and that would be fine. They have a way to make each
On
of those.
each principal structure, but we're
Right.
not even saying that's,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a far-fetched, but I think
They have
the
to s-
intent is we're trying to make it as easy as possible to do one. So,
Right, and then the next section obviously is exterior appearance and size. There's some things, I think, like I said, Peter had gathered things from other ADU bylaws. There's some things I'm not sure about. The accessory dwelling unit shall be designed to maintain the appearance and essential character of a one-family dwelling. I guess that makes sense. What I'm not wanting to do, as I think I talked about before, is put a design sense on it. Like, oh, the existing house is so wonderful that we have to match it. Well, it isn't always, right? So I don't want to really have that. Other things that we just talked about, the set that, number one is obviously the state law. The number two is something we agreed that, hey, it has to be within the setbacks, done, right? And other things, like I said, are things that Peter had found, like about the front entrance. Should we be able to tell the front entrance from front entrance of the primary dwelling from the front entrance of the ADU? Number four is about staircases, which I think makes sense. Like, yep, you might need an open egress stair in the back, but do we really want open egress stairs, like porch, pressure-treated railings in the front of a property? Probably not, if we can help it. Detached ADU needs to provide for, and I'm sure this was be under the building code anyway, but they have to
okay, can we
provide.
strike that? Because that's just common sense. It has to, right, for 5.
Number
that?
5.
I think it has to have, like, that's just
Yeah.
building codes.
That's building
right
code.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that can come out. I wasn't sure about number 6 either. Exterior access, well, I guess 6 kind of goes with 5, exterior access ways.
The intent of this, okay, exterior access way shall not be detached,
Detract.
detract from the single-family appearance of the dwelling. I think this is where it kind of comes on, you start allowing, stairways on the exterior buildings that are visible from the street.
I mean, am I imagining, like, this, the essential character of a one-family dwelling and this one both seems to be like, you see some stuff online with the ADUs where it's like a tree house, or like, there's like, or like a hobbit house, like, some of these, like, do you know what I mean? Like these like niche
Yeah, yeah.
designs that are, it doesn't look like a home, right? And I think that, but that to me means like nothing on the outside should make it look like it's not a house.
Yeah.
Is that different?
I think it does seem different than 5 and the overarching
intro?
7.6.3, yeah.
Well, I don't love the overarching, I like the intent, but I feel like it is getting into design and it's just so subjective and my, you know, when things are subjective, they don't usually work well. Somebody's disappointed. So, I think we should try to clean that up. And maybe we just say that, like, maybe just say it's an intent, but people get to do what, the by right is that if it meets building code, it has to be approved.
Yeah, it's,
And
yeah.
I don't want to give, why put more on the commissioner, say, does this meet the intent too?
Yeah, I
Does
think-
it make sense?
I think it's iffy in that way too. Yeah. But
It's getting weeds.
weedsy.
Yeah.
I never do that. But in the weeds, weedsy. I like it.
We use that a lot in our board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we really need that.
I mean, we have above, it's the intent to maintain the single-family character of the neighborhood containing ADUs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
That's good enough. That
So maybe
just
that's
means
good
it's
enough.
an intent, and it still doesn't matter as long as it meets the building code, right? So, yeah. clean it up.
So no 4 and 5?
oh, I think four is okay. That's about the stairways.
Do we want to put that condition? What are we gaining by saying enclose the stairway?
Yeah, I don't, all stairways located above the shall be enclosed.
It could be a design feature.
It could be.
Well, it's true. The thing is, like, okay, when an ADU happens within an existing building, all right, right? You can carve out the third floor of your house, and that would be an ADU. You have to have 2 means of egress from that.
I mean, that
So-
has to happen by default. We have to specify that here.
No,
'Cause
that's
by-
building code.
That's
Yeah,
building
that's
code.
right. But do you want a pressure-treated egress stair coming out of a third-floor window of a house and going down the front of the house to the driveway? That's what it's trying to control a little bit, like the haphazardness. Like, if you do it, you gotta kind of be careful about how you do it, right? It would meet code. It meets code.
Like put the,
Fire escape stairs, are you referring to that?
Yeah, well, so, not a fire escape, but like and a second means of egress.
The metal stairs?
Could be.
Yeah.
or
Could
just
be
like
convenient.
decking or, you know,
Yeah.
but like pressure treated wood, like down the front.
I mean, there's some in downtown Ashland that do that, right? Not down the front of the house, but you see them on the side. So, you know, because there's probably an apartment up there, and that's your second means of egress. So those are the types of things I wonder, you know,
I don't know, I mean, that still has yes, materiality for that egress stair is different, but it still has to follow the other heights and widths as an egress stair, if that is your second means of egress. But for 900 square feet, I don't know if you need 2.
I think you do. In fact,
you do?
in fact, I've talked to Doug about it before this even, about regular ADUs, and he said one of the distinguishing features of an ADU is that it's a separate dwelling unit and has 2 means of egress as a,
Okay.
so,
right.
so unless that's changed in his mind versus something else, I think it is a distinguishing feature.
Okay.
This is what we're talking about, right, Tricia?
Yeah, something like that.
But do we, I mean, the whole thing is by right. And so I think these are skirting, the
Well, it may
intent
need
is
to-
go to the building commissioner and apply for a permit.
Yeah, it may need to go through, I'm just raising it as a question, right? I don't know, I think we are allowed to put some kinds of controls on this, but I'm not sure. So it would have to be a question for Lisa, and it would be a question for, maybe Doug as well. But I get it. If we can't do it, we can't do it. I'm just raising the question that this is why somebody else put this in their bylaws, to prevent this type of situation. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, though.
I'm
You
not
can't,
saying it
like-
isn't. I explained why I put it out there,
Yeah.
so.
Mill building and the metal stairs works perfect, but,
I'm just gonna share my screen real quick, because I know that I know an example from, I just showed it to Tricia. But you can see the screen here. Front of the house. You're talking about a big pressure treated stairway coming off of the third floor.
So, but we started this saying we weren't gonna have design requirements, and that's what this is. Like, I feel like we're better off sticking to building code. I think some suggestions of what aren't bad, but like
I'm
the
not
building code is the code, and it's very clear, and then the directions are clear. in the
I
code
get it.
book.
I'm not sure we can even do it. I am raising the question. And I think things like that are not the intent of what we hope to provide with these ADUs, right? So, but that's looking at what some of the results might be, and that we should think about that. So if that's okay, if you're like, go for it, then that's one thing. If it's possible for us to write something in to mediate it, and again, it might be a question for Lisa to see if it's even possible,
What's the
then,
harm?
then we might want to think about it.
my question would be, if there was a scenario where it is an open staircase, would the square footage be more than 900 square feet? And if it is enclosed, would the square feet, I mean, the
That's what I was
stairs
thinking,
come
that takes a
within the
lot of-
900?
No, it counts, again, this is all
Because
through,
an egress stair, it's probably not.
this is all just through my experience with the zoning board of appeals and with Doug and going through an ADU, that the ADU is the locked door, that separates you from the, so if the door is at the bottom of the stair, then yeah, maybe. If your door where you put your key in is the bottom of the stair, then yeah, that stair probably is your unit. It's a private and no one else can get to it, right? But where does someone knock on your door? Where does Amazon come to? That's your unit.
So should we define that when we are talking about the 900 square feet? Because now that raises a question to me, right? For me, if I need that 900 square feet and the staircase is creating that, open staircase allows me to create that additional area, then I probably don't want it to be an open staircase, right? So if I'm saying from design point of view, 900 that we have here is the usable area,
No, it's all,
excluding the egress.
you don't need it for that, because again, it's where you can have an enclosed stair without your front door at the bottom, right? Amazon would come up the stairs, the enclosed stairs, it's sheltering you from the weather, right?
Which is
Snow
common
can't,
for other floors.
snow can't get in there, right?
So would that be like a staircase that's accessible for the other floors as well?
It has to be
Or the
where,
entry,
it
I
has to be
mean.
where the two units are separate.
It's like a vestibule with stairs.
Yeah, it
like
could
with
be a vestibule,
stairs,
yeah.
like, that anyone can enter, right? Like the door into that area isn't locked.
Mhm.
And then there's stairs inside, and then eventually you come to a locked door, but
There's
your-
your unit.
yeah, with
Yeah,
your unit.
it's about
yeah.
the privacy of your unit.
Yeah.
And that when you lock out other people to your unit, that's the 900 square feet. So it doesn't include little vestibules in between, or anything like that, so.
I certainly don't want to do anything that defeats the purpose of of sort of the initiative to have an ADU bylaw in place. But I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum, I think, where I'm inclined to appreciate the things that are keeping some guardrails in terms of what the result looks like. Like, I'm good with the exposed with 4, and I'm good with the introduction. And if it's not permissible, I'm good with the state or Lisa telling us that it's not permissible.
I don't think we have to make any decisions here. I'd like Anna to weigh in. I'd like the public to weigh in, but this is just so that, okay, we have a discussion going. Let's ask Lisa if she's going to be like, oop, no, then great. We don't need to discuss it anymore. She knows it's not going to pass. If she's like, yep, these things have been passing in other communities, you have a right to put some definition on it, we can have a further discussion about it.
Should we then add just exclusive of that line which talks about exclusive of any garage, shed? Should we say exclusive of egress stair?
But not,
But it sounds like the building code's already clear on that.
it is,
Yeah.
I think.
I
I don't think this is
Okay.
a,
If Doug is like very clear that it's locked door on, then I feel like the building code addresses that. And I kind of feel like if we put like shoulds or we would like that's where we've tried to avoid doing those things in the past because it's gray area and it's not actually enforceable. It's like not
yeah.
real. And so my personal preference is that like these things make sense. It doesn't seem like it's going to be any of these things is going to prevent somebody from being able to build an ADU on their property.
Yeah, I mean, things like the
Yeah.
egress, I mean, I've done EDUs in Ashland, you know, it doesn't count. That stuff doesn't count.
All right.
In the same way that you can, like, it doesn't even count necessarily in towns, strict like Newton, you know, your stairs doesn't count. You have to get out of your house. It doesn't count towards square footage. It can go in the setback line. Like, they just don't
Okay.
count for those type of things.
Okay, if it's clear, that's,
And in the grand scheme, like there are lots of other things that are going to drive up the cost much more than I would imagine these things are. I mean, like anyone with a septic system
But
is
that's,
in a whole other like
Category.
situation,
So-
right? Like
that's a good point, the way 7631 is written. So you can interpret it, it can't be more than 50% of the area of the house or 900 square feet. But you can technically, I think, interpret it with, it's 900 square feet, but I had a garage and a shed on my ADU. The second part of that, exclusive, because that's what Deepa was asking about. Do we have to define also the stairway? So that sentence, is that from the state law, the way that's written?
I think that's from the state, is
Is
that
it?
from, is that the number one from the state law? But what it's saying is that, and maybe, I'm only reading it here, is that, when you count the square feet, you're counting the dwelling unit.
No, I know.
You're not counting anything accessory. And the same, when you're trying to do how big is the principal dwelling, so I can take 50% of it.
Yeah.
You're not counting the garage or the stairs or the porch, or you're counting the living space.
do we,
Yeah,
so
I
is
just
there a
think that might
gross
not be-
versus usable versus net area or something? That's how the square footages are typically defined? Because that, when you have net or usable, that's when all these kind of get taken off, and that's a much more clear language typically, so I'm curious
We can see if there's a
if there's
definition.
something, if there's a language, a word that's missing here.
Yeah, we can look and see if they're spelling out a definition for floor area or usable floor area, whatever,
Yeah.
livable space or however they want it. We can look for it
Yeah.
if that definition is in there somewhere from the state.
I think the state law is very similar, but it might be a little bit cleaner than this, but maybe not, maybe that's exact.
You're talking about a definition of an EDU, a self-contained housing unit exclusive of sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities on the same lot as a principal dwelling. Is no larger than gross floor area of a half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller.
So they said gross floor area.
Correct.
So that's important.
So that's to the exterior walls, which is what we typically measure.
Yeah.
So-
So adding that is important because that's very different than saying floor area.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that and the definition, is in there.
And then that exclusive of garage shed or similar structure, does that have to be there, or is that a period? And then the square footage does not include, I mean, to make this clear?
It possibly can be out if we have a
Yeah.
definition of gross floor area,
Yeah.
because that gross floor area would not include the garage and
yeah.
that kind
So
of
if we
stuff.
put gross floor area, we can take out garage.
the
Yes,
second
you should
part
be
of
able
that
to-
whole thing.
You should be able to take out that whole thing.
Okay.
'Cause- But we'll need to make sure we have the gross floor area and have it defined in our
In the
definitions.
definitions.
Yeah, the way
Okay.
we want, the way the state defines it. Sorry.
Are we missing 7.6.5?
Correct. I know one element, just to be clear, I was able to touch base with the DPW, and I think in my last reiteration, it talked about having a meter on the water, on the incoming, and a meter on the sewer. Obviously, that you cannot meter sewer.
Yeah.
The sewer is obviously estimated off of the water. So we just kind of clarified that with Dan Mauer, DPW, Assistant DPW Director.
So why did the question is, why do they want a separate water meter from the principal dwelling? Like, why is that required?
I think for billing purposes.
But that should be up to the person who's running the ADU, not the town. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you having a second? Well, I don't understand. Because I can take a part of my house and make it an ADU, I think, right? That's what we're saying. Okay, now I'm gonna put that ugly staircase out front that you don't want, right? And why would I have to get a separate water for that and a separate meter? I mean, there's simple ways to make an ADU and there's complicated ways, right? So I just don't understand why that's a requirement. I'm not saying that people might not want it as an ADU, and I let the people take all the showers they want and pay their own bill, but I don't know why it's a requirement.
I can follow up.
Yeah.
And actually, the state does provide definition of gross floor area, but it is the interior faces of the exterior walls.
And to the center of the glazing, that's how I think.
So if they had that,
Doesn't say anything about glazing, but so
No, that's probably the commercial side.
interior faces of exterior walls or from the center line of walls separating buildings or dwelling units, but excluding crawl spaces, garage parking spaces, attics, enclosed porches, and similar spaces. So there's our
that's a
definition.
simpler way to write it.
Hmm?
Simpler way to write it. Gross floor area.
Right.
And we have to add that.
And we'll add the definition. And they also have a, it also says, where there are multiple principal dwellings on the lot, the gross floor area of the largest principal dwelling shall be used for determining the maximum size of a protected use ADU. So they've got that covered.
So like stuff like that, we don't have to repeat. That's the state law, right? We don't have to repeat it in our bylaw.
Well, there's a whole list of definitions here, but we might want to pick out a few of them and have that updated definition
Yeah.
as our bylaw
Yeah.
definition, right? So, but yeah, there's a lot of these, that also has ferry terminal. I don't think we need that in ours, so.
No.
Do you think? No ferry terminals?
Not here in Ashland.
So, yeah,
Not too much coastline.
okay.
I wonder, to your question, what happens when you have like multifamily, like level 1 and level 2, like how do they, don't think
Well,
every level has a different water meter?
No, they don't. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I don't know why we're insisting on that. I mean,
I'm gonna
I've owned a
follow-
two-family, it had
I'm
one
just
water
gonna
So
start-
meter.
until-
I'm gonna stop the conversation. I'm gonna follow up with DPW.
Yeah.
And we'll come back next.
Yeah, I'm
next
guessing
meeting.
the intent is if it's two separate units versus in the same building. So you may want to just clarify.
I'll clarify.
I have no preference. Okay, parking we talked about last time. I think we had kind of decided on the half mile. That half mile is by how the crow flies, and it's not how you walk, which is never how the crow flies.
That sentence on location and appearance of
Yeah.
driveway, I mean, I,
Gotta get rid of
yeah, do we need that?
driveways. Look terrible anyway. I mean, so.
What's that?
The last sentence on 766.
Yeah, so as long as they're following the driveway bylaw, then they're following the driveway, but they're doing the same thing that a single-family house could do, because they're following the driveway bylaw.
Yeah, and with that, just the backstory there is, in our bylaws, we require 5 feet between the driveway and the property line. So and there's a lot of places in Ashland, right, that people pay right up to their property line, but it's in the bylaw, that should be 5 feet there. So if someone tries to extend their driveway, I just want to make sure that, yes, there is 5 feet between the two.
But you do have number 7, driveways shall be designed in conformance to section 6.3 of Ashland zoning.
Which that is,
Yeah.
which I'm calling out.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a specific call out for that reason.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And obviously, this isn't a common driveway, as a special permit would be required when you theoretically, we do have a special permit for a common driveway, right? And that's when you come through a subdivision process theoretically, right? And you wave down a roadway, right? And you have a common driveway going back to 2 lots through a paper way, right? And so we're not going, that's a different application, right?
Yep.
And so I just kind of wanted to call that out. This is not a common driveway requirement, which is a special permit process.
So on the 767, there, if, I just get, if it's supposed to be just a building permit by right, do we have to have this separate permit granting authority? You know what I mean? Like, it just makes a layer that seems to convolute the whole thing.
I'm not sure it does convolute it, but it might be able to be very much simplified.
2 and 3 sound very similar. Or the intent is very similar.
I mean, it's just building code at this point, like, that's the whole point of this, so.
I think 2 and 3 are, I think 3 is addressed by 2, and so maybe 3 comes out.
I agree 3 comes out, but I would keep 1, 2, and 4. And I think 1 just kind of makes it clear where does the application go for EDU? You know, it's not hurting anybody.
But is there a separate application? Like, I don't understand. I thought it was a building permit, so that,
But it's gonna be it's gonna be ADU, accessory dwelling unit. It's a
Yep.
Building permit, so it's gonna be a building permit, and what you're applying for is an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, so it is a different process. You have to have you have to know the square footage of the existing house, you have to have 50% of that, you
Yeah.
have to know what that,
You
so
gotta
it
know.
is a,
so it has, this says such review shall be conducted concurrently as part of the building permit application, implying that there's some other process. That's what I'm confused about.
We could take out that second sentence.
yeah, I mean, I think it's important to know who it is, like, you're not going to the zoning board of appeals anymore, you're just going to the building commissioner. So, yeah, so he is just reviewing the building permit, so we can, take that out, but he is reviewing it in a different way than a single-family home because it's different.
The condition 4, what, I mean, can you impose conditions on a building permit? You can? Like, like it is that it had to meet code and then it's approved. And you have, I mean, your condition is it has to be built to what you submitted and it has to be to code, but I guess I'm sticking to are these different than we do with a single-family home? Because I have never seen that.
Where are you reading this, Kate?
Number 4.
7674.
Yeah, I think I probably took that from a sample bylaw.
Yeah, we probably don't need it.
You know, and I would say any condition of the law is not fulfilled, right? Maybe it's not a condition, any conditions imposed. But yeah, I'll look into that further. But I don't mind removing it. It's not that big of a deal. I think the biggest thing is if it's being, I think that's also, you know, what is the situation, right? If, say EDU comes in, right, and then somebody does start using it for a short-term rental, right, and somebody flags it on Zillow or on whatever, right, then yeah, we do have the ability to enforce it. And so it's almost come an enforcement mechanism. But Doug can enforce through other measures. But, you know, I think that's what it's trying to kind of clarify is if you're not following the rules and regulations of the state bylaw and this bylaw, you will be stripped of the occupancy permit, right? And it's an enforcement. It's almost like an enforcement tool in that end, but I can see taking it out. I don't think we have to have it in there. There's other enforcement measures within our regulations and from a building commissioner's purview. So I'm neither here nor there, but I think that's probably that's the intent of what I was trying to include within this draft.
It's an important point. I mean, I think we should, it's 10 to 10 here, so I'm not sure I can think
I'm getting
completely,
tired.
yeah, clearly about it, but yeah, it's about, you know, making sure, you know, how do we make sure that the regulations we're setting forth are followed? One is the building permit process, obviously, but then what about after that? You know,
And in the first guidelines, they do talk about, okay, state, you know, information, you have to roll up to the state, how many permit is it introduced? In other ADU bylaws, you know, prior to this, it was always like, okay, is it rented to a family member? That would have to be checked in every year, you have to recertify almost, right? But I think in this case, it's almost saying, okay, it can be revoked, right? If you're not following these rules and regulations. I think that's where that word comes in. Revoked upon a determination that these regulations are not being followed. Because there is times when regulations are not followed, right? We know that. Everyone knows that. And I think it's just a little bit of an enforcement action bylaw that you put in that, again, it doesn't change can you or can you put an ADU in your house. You're just saying and you're clarifying, hey, if you're not doing this, there is a penalty. And it comes through the zoning. And it can come through the zoning enforcement officer. But that can be changed, that language can be changed, and it can be removed, but I think that's the intent.
all right, well, I think we got it down more and more clear, which is great. So, then we have some things yet to be discussed, which is fine. So we'll do another iteration of it, and then, but we'll plan to discuss both of these bylaws on March 13th. Have a forum at that time, and then see if we can tweak it to our final. And once we go through and just have a clean copy of it, we'll have Lisa look at it too, so that we already know the answers to those questions before the 13th. All right, is there anything else on that?
No comment.
I think it's close.
Yeah.
I think it's close. All right, site plan review timeline. We still need to,
You know what, I was out last week, and this week's been pretty busy catching up, so I haven't even had a chance. I looked at it, I know what I need to do, and that can be kind of brought forth at the next meeting.
yeah, so would we have, I mean, that's a really simple thing, right? We're
Yeah.
just changing a date, so,
Yeah, I've already,
so why don't we put it the same form as the rest of them, you know? And like, it's kind
That,
of a one-liner.
that also needs a public hearing.
Right,
Correct.
so that's why I'm
Oh,
saying, why
okay.
don't we have
Yeah,
the form
no,
with the rest of them?
Yeah, I think it's,
It's just about changing a number, right?
yeah.
yeah, it comes
That's a
out to
good idea.
section 9.4.5, procedures, of site plan review and design review, and that comes under 3, and it says the planning board may hold a fact-finding in public information meeting. I want to change that to public hearing, because we hold public hearings. We do
Yeah.
not hold fact-finding meetings, right? Information within, and it says 30 days, I'm gonna say 65 days. And match it up with special permit language in the regulations. And then, really from there on out, that's pretty much,
So that's one that we can have, like,
Yeah.
as opposed to these two bylaws, which are new.
Get
I'm
all-
gonna
rid
take
Yeah.
this, I'm gonna strike this, I'm gonna check, check, and then it's gonna be.
Right, done.
Yes, 100%, because site plan review, you know, we talked about this, right? Site plan review it just lives in, it's not in within regular Mass General law, but any site plan review, we have a public hearing, we notify abutters as section 48 requires, right?
The process,
The
yeah,
best practice, right?
we just want the process to go in tandem.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
100%.
all. Okay.
We
Well,
can
and I
take care
think
of
the
this.
best argument to the public is sometimes they're both, and then that's just worse. And like,
Yeah,
so we're taking, yeah, I think that, I don't think anyone will have a problem with it either, but
yeah,
Yeah.
go for it, yeah. Okay, so we'll do a simple one like that, and we'll keep it, keep it with all the other bylaws, that we're gonna have all the stuff at the same time. And this project after planning board approval has to wait, because I'm too tired to get into it. Unless someone else wants to take the mic and you can lead. I can't do it tonight. Okay. Anything on that list that has to be discussed before we do meeting minutes?
Just the one new project, just want to mention, we have an A&R plan for 11 Franklin Road, and that is a plan that will be circulated. That is the Hicks property behind the Valentine.
Okay.
There was a deed restriction that was purchased by the town in stating that there could be only 8 lots carved out of that parcel. This would be the first lot of those 8 allowed.
Oh, okay.
So I have all that requirement, that documentation. I met with Robin Hicks and his wife last night when they dropped off that A&R plan. And then the only other news for new projects is the application for 61 Waverly Street 40B was dropped off to our office last Tuesday. And so that process is going to start rolling with the zoning board of appeals. And so that's the information I can provide at this point.
All right, thank you.
The only thing I saw in minutes was, it had Marcelo making a motion, but he wasn't at this meeting. No, I can't find it.
He was at the meeting, but he left early. Isn't that, isn't?
He wasn't at the 13th, right? That was the first meeting without him.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
You think it was?
I think it was a motion.
There weren't too many motions. And, I don't think there was any motions, because all we did was talk about. There was no motions with the Ashland Historical Preservation and discussion, correct?
Yeah, I don't
might
think
have
so.
just missed it, or I might have been looking at the wrong thing.
I can do a search all and try to find it.
All right, does anyone still need more time? All right. Anyone want to make the motion?
Make a motion to accept the minutes February 13th meeting as presented.
And a roll call vote?
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Amanda Hayes, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So those are approved. And does anyone have anything else? Our next meeting is obviously March 13th. Other than that, we're at the end of our list. All right, then I will make a motion to adjourn at exactly 10 o'clock. Is there a second? A roll call vote.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So we are good.
All right.
Thank you, WACA.
Thank you, Paul.